Good afternoon and welcome everyone to our infrastructure funding opportunities for tribal water utilities. We're going to go ahead and get going. It is the top of the hour and I want to make sure that we stay on time. We'll have others join us as they do and they'll just go ahead and get caught up. But thanks for joining us today. We are recording this session. And so the recording will be made available after the session on YouTube, and you'll be sent a link. But thanks so much for joining us today. So the work we're doing this as part of is part of our Rural, Small, and Tribal Priority Area 3 work, which is focused on tribal wastewater utilities and tribal communities, and it's been funded by the Environmental Protection Agency under an assistance agreement. So just some quick Zoom tips. If you'd like to ask a question, you can either put that directly in the chat box and we'll see it there and answer it as we can. Or if you would like to unmute to ask a question directly, you can go ahead and raise your hand and we'll go ahead and call on you then. If you want to go ahead and unmute, you just have to unmute via the toolbar for Zoom. If you want to turn your webcam on or off, you are able to do so via the start video or stop video, but everybody will be able to see what you are doing. So make sure, like me, I have this background here. And also, if you need additional access assistance, we have turned on closed captioning for this session, and you can toggle that on or off via your toolbar. Just some quick webinar logistics. This session has not been submitted for pre-approval of continuing education hours. There are just too many states and too many wastewater operator certification programs out there for us to be able to do that. We will be emailing certificates to everyone that attended a day or two after the webinar, so probably on Monday, as well as the slides. When the webinar is over, an evaluation will pop up at the end of the webinar. We'd really appreciate your feedback. This is the first of 6 different funding webinars that we will be doing as part of this. One other thing, please let us know in the chat if there's anybody attending in the room with you. We'd like to know who's there with you. You can also just email me or chat me directly. You don't have to chat everyone in the session today. So who are we? You may not have heard about us before. We know there are some familiar faces out there, but if you don't know who we are the Southwest Environmental Finance Center, and we're part of the University of New Mexico School of Engineering. Right here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, you can see the Sandia Mountains up there along the Rio Grande. And here we are. This is our engineering building here at the main campus in Albuquerque at the University of New Mexico. We have also partnered with the Wichita State University Environmental Finance Center to help us work with tribal nations in EPA Region 7. They also are part of the Heartland Environmental Justice Center. So if you are a tribal nation in EPA Region 7, you may have worked with Wichita State University in other situations. And so they're located in Wichita in the state of Kansas. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Matt Ziegler. I'm the Tribal Water Utility Program Director here at the Southwest Environmental Finance Center. And I've been working with tribal nations in EPA Region 6 for over 20 years now on issues related to drinking water and wastewater. I'd also, before we get into this poll here, I jumped ahead a little too quickly. I'd also like to acknowledge a couple of my colleagues that are working on this program with me. I have Tucker Colvin, who is who's hosting this, and he's watching, the chats as well as anything else going on with this webinar today. And Tucker is working out of Montana. I believe he's up in Billings, Montana, and he's going to be working with our tribal nations up in EPA Region 8. And so he might be reaching out to you to assess what wastewater needs are for your communities. And Tucker, if you just want to say hi real quick, I'd appreciate it.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, thanks for being here. Yeah, like Matt said, I'm up in Billings, used to be with them in Albuquerque, so recently just got here. And I used to be a water operator, so that's my background. I'm still certified drinking water. But happy to help out in anything y'all need, and especially wastewater for this project. So thank you.
Thank you, Tucker. We also have Shannon Sloan Pepper, who's also on, and Shannon's going to be helping our tribal nations both in EPA Region 6 and a little bit up in Region 8 with our tribes in Utah. Shannon, do you just want to say a quick hello to everyone?
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks Matt for hosting this meeting today. I'm pretty excited about the content. I've been working on doing some funding assistance for the Southwest EFC for a couple of years now, and excited to grow my knowledge in this area.
Great. Thanks so much, Shannon. One more person we have on the line is Mike Rivera, who is a certified wastewater operator here with us in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Mike, do you want to say hi?
Good afternoon to all you, and welcome. Hopefully we can provide you with some good information that you can use in the future, and always reach out to any of us that if you need any help with anything. I'm also a certified operator here in New Mexico, water and wastewater, and a lab tech. So I'll provide my email on the chat, and if you guys need anything from any of us, just let us know. Thank you, Matt.
Hey, Mike, really appreciate it. Thanks so much. All right, so before we delve into the different funding opportunities out there, I just wanted to run a quick poll and wanted to know, what type of organization are you with? Are you with a tribal nation, a regulatory agency? Are you with the Indian Health Service? Are you with a funder? Or are you a technical assistance provider? Or are you with a different other type of group joining us today? So I'm going to go ahead and launch that poll. If you would go ahead and put in your answer for that so we can get some feedback. All right. Let's go ahead and end that poll. All right, so it looks like primarily we have tribal nations joining us today. We do have a couple people from Indian Health Service and one other person joining us to get some more information about the different funding opportunities for wastewater at tribal nations. So thanks so much for providing that feedback. Just real quick, I wanted to talk about our tribal wastewater program that we are doing for EPA Regions 6, 7, and 8, and this is just for tribal nations. And so we did a kickoff webinar back in late March of this year to talk about this program, but it's all about providing training and assistance to tribal communities to help prevent, reduce, and eliminate pollution, and enabling those communities to comply with environmental regs and build that TMF, that technical, managerial, and financial capacity to sustainably operate your wastewater infrastructure, and also to help your tribal communities get access to all this public funding we're hearing about to make sure that your wastewater infrastructure needs are being met. And we want to support those tribal communities, protect both public health and the environment through this program. And you can learn more about this program on our website and directly request assistance through that website. You can either go ahead and type in that URL there, or you can go ahead and use that quick reference code to gain access to it. And before we go any farther, I want to make sure to go ahead and I'm going to drop the slides into the chat. And let me just grab those real quick. And I will also be emailing these out to you. If I can figure this out. There we go. All right, they should be on their way. So those slides are in the chat. And so the services that we're offering as part of our tribal wastewater program is, first thing we're doing is we're doing wastewater needs assessment. And our hope really is to do a needs assessment for each of the tribal communities in EPA region 6, 7, and 8. And we've already started that outreach to you and to others in your community to help us understand both, what are your technical, managerial, financial capacity needs? What training needs do you have? What technical assistance needs do you have? And, do you need assistance, obtaining infrastructure funding, to meet the needs of your community? We're also doing peer-to-peer learning through peer-to-peer sessions, and we're doing free training and technical assistance for that funding and that TMF capacity development. And so you'll be seeing more and more of these things in your email advertising for these trainings that are free and hopefully will help meet your needs as you provide these, vital services to your community. So this is the first session in our tribal wastewater infrastructure funding series. And today we're doing an overview of those different wastewater funding opportunities that are available for tribal nations. And a lot of them are the same as what state systems can get, but many of them are specialized for tribes. In future sessions, we'll look at how to access those clean water state revolving fund dollars. A lot of tribes don't access CWSRF funding. It's maybe not known to you what that is and how to access it. So we're going to go into one session specific to that. We'll also talk about non-federal funding programs. There's a lot of state programs out there that allow access to other infrastructure funding dollars that you may not be aware of. And also, we're going to go into a session on how to manage your grant after you award. How do you put out, to obtain contractors, and how do you report to regulators on how the project's going and all sorts of stuff like that. So that's all coming down the pipeline after this session. So let's just kind of look at this federal funding pathway for wastewater infrastructure funds. Okay, so Congress is at the top of where the funds come from, and they allocate funding dollars to, and these are the different programs we're going to be talking about today. They allocate funding to the EPA State Revolving Fund. And so you have both the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund and the Wastewater State Revolving, or the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. We're focused on the clean water today, since we're talking about wastewater. The Department of Housing and Urban Development also funds wastewater in tribal communities. USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Rural Development funds wastewater in tribal communities, and the Bureau of Reclamation also has a program for funding that wastewater infrastructure in communities. So let's focus on the EPA SRF first. So Congress gives EPA SRF dollars, and a lot of those dollars are taken by this congressionally directed spending. And we used to call this pork barrel spending, right? So it's like every congressperson wants to grab dollars and put them towards their district. And so we've gotten rid of pork barrel spending, but now we have these correct congressionally directed spending that's taking that SRF funding. And actually the CDS, I mean, it's a vast majority of the funds do go towards this congressionally directed spending. After that's been spent, what's left? It's split between the state revolving funds and then the Indian set aside. And so there's the drinking water Indian set aside, but today we're talking about the clean water Indian set aside. And so these are probably the funding that you're most familiar with is the clean water Indian set aside. The state revolving funds, the vast majority of the state revolving funds goes towards loans. Okay, and that's why a lot of people don't take advantage of it, is because it's loan. We want grants. We may not have the financial capacity to pay back loans, and so we're mostly interested in grants, and that's true for tribal communities as well as state, rural small communities as well. When we look at the Indian set aside, the vast majority of the Indian set aside clean water goes towards the IHS sanitation deficiency system. But EPA also has the ability to do some projects through direct grants to our tribal communities. Now, the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nations Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, they inject, billions of dollars into the funding that's awarded to EPA, to HUD, to USDA, to BOR. Okay, so it's in addition to what's usually provided to these different programs. There's other ways to get funding, and we're not necessarily going to talk about them today, but the states do have quite a few different funding programs out there that are accessible to tribes, including capital outlay, and others that we're going to talk about later. If you know some other state programs that you've accessed previously, put them in the chat. Let us know what they are. But that'll be in an upcoming session. Also in an upcoming session, we're going to talk about the self-funded option, where tribes can directly fund projects themselves. They may have enterprise funds. They may have general tribal funds where they're able to allocate dollars towards infrastructure that aren't, their needs aren't met other ways, and so they do it through a self-funded option, which is a great option, but there are some pitfalls associated with that we'll talk about in a future session. Now, most of the stuff that we're talking about today is part of these funding tables, and so we're part of the Environmental Finance Center Network, which is a nationwide network of technical assistance providers. And if you go to the EFC network website here, you can access this map and click on each of the states to find out what funding is available in your state. But also there's a very specific tribal funding table that you can access. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to throw that funding table in the chat so that you can have that as well. Let me just go ahead and throw it in there. All right, and so this table, it tells you both drinking water and clean water funding sources for tribes. And it has links where you can access the web pages for the different funding providers. So let's do a poll about, let us know what infrastructure funding sources that your utility has used. What has been, the funding source that has been useful for you to use. And so let me go ahead and start that poll. And I'll go ahead and launch it right now. And let us know where you're funding for, you can be drinking water, it can be clean water in this case. Go ahead and answer that poll. Do you get your infrastructure funding dollars through the Indian Health Service Sanitation Deficiency System, which is where we get a lot of our funding for clean water at tribal nations? Do you use the EPA Indian set aside, direct grant from EPA? Have you been able to access those congressionally directed spending dollars through your congressional delegation? How about BOR money? Have you gotten it through that, or the USDA Rural Development Fund, or through HUD, Housing and Urban Development, Or have you taken out a loan through the state revolving fund or some other state mechanism? So go ahead and let us know where you get your funding dollars. We've had about 62% of participants answer so far. So go ahead, and you can choose more than one in this case. So you definitely, if you have been able to access funding from more than one of these sources, you can go ahead and choose more than one. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and let's see where people are getting their funding from. Let's share those results. All right, so 67% of us have been able to get infrastructure funding through the Indian Health Service Sanitation Deficiency System. A few of us have gotten, another third have gotten EPA Indian set aside. Some of us have been able to get congressionally directed spending, some BORs in there. USDA has been a big funder, it looks like, for water and clean water at tribal nations, and HUD. And I do have, let me see, I do have a few participants today that did have funding from another type of mechanism that isn't listed here. So if you're feeling up to it, if you could go ahead and put in the chat, what was that other source of funding for your tribal nation, for your community? Let us know what it is. I'd be interested. There are so many different funding sources out there. It can get confusing. And so part of the role we play is helping you determine what's the best funding source for our project. Hey, thank you for that answer there. So we have one person that said it was self-funded. And that's a lot of the times that's the way it is with enterprises at tribal nations, is that they have to be self-funded, right? Because of course Indian Health Service can't fund those projects, and so it has to be self-funded. So go ahead and feel free to add into the chat as we're going through, and we would appreciate it. Thanks so much. I'm going to stop sharing that poll. So the first part of the federal funding that I wanted to talk about is this congressionally directed spending. And again, so Congress appropriates dollars to EPA for both the drinking water and the clean water state revolving funds. And then this congressionally directed spending grabs money out of it, and then the money flows towards the clean water state revolving fund. Okay, but first, that congressionally directed spending grabs the money. Oh, hey, we got another answer there. So you're a small public school district on the reservation, and so local school tax funded. So that's an interesting mechanism for funding, and for sure, I can see how that would work. So thank you for that answer. So congressionally directed spending, again, so when we talk about the state revolving funds, and for both drinking water and clean water, that bipartisan infrastructure law, it was $11.7 billion infused into the state revolving fund for water, drinking water, and wastewater infrastructure. And then there was an additional billion for emerging contaminants. And so you hear a lot about emerging contaminants with the PFAS, the PFOS, pharmaceuticals, all sorts of stuff like that. Well, out of that funding, and here, you know, Congress runs away with some of it and gives it to their pet projects. And then how much is left for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund or the Indian set aside? And so they take the funding off the top from the SRF, and they fund specific water and wastewater projects in their state. And, you know, I mean, it's not like they can fund anything. Basically, the projects that are chosen for congressionally directed spending, you know, these projects have to meet USDA criteria, both for need, if there has to be a shown need for this funding, but also other requirements in terms of financial records and in terms of capacity to maintain infrastructure if it is built. And so here's an example from New Mexico. I'm in New Mexico, and we have Martin Heinrich is one of our senators. And so typically on your senators and congresspersons' websites, you can find a form to request that your project be funded through congressionally directed spending. And so here's an example from fiscal year 23 from his office. And then what happens is that here's an example of what his office submitted for fiscal year 23. So this is his request for funds to go to, and you can see all the different things in New Mexico, and you can see that, they're also both small communities in the state, but also tribal communities in the state. And so, this here is 500,000. So we just add 3 zeros on the end. Here's $10 million. This is City of Gallup's a fairly large system. And so these are the requests that are put in to the budget. And then this is an example of the actual projects that are funded based on those requests. So not all projects get funded, okay? Now, what are the advantages and disadvantages of this congressionally directed spending? Well, primary advantages is 100% grant. You don't have to pay back anything. You get to bypass these other funding mechanisms. You move to the head of the line. But the disadvantage, well, it takes money out of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund that would normally go to states or to tribes. It really is a limited number of projects that are funded using this mechanism. And as of now, the fiscal year 2025 requests are already closed. So you have to start planning now and show a demonstrated need to put in your request for fiscal year 2026. And those are usually going to close, right around March of 2025. So next year around March, you should have your request in. And so if you want more information, you really should contact your congressional delegation. And so this is where it's important to know your delegates and to be able to reach out. We have some tribal nations that are very, very successful and have very, very good communication paths with their congressional delegation. And so they're able to access this funding. All right. The next funding source that I wanted to talk about is the Clean Water Indian Set-Aside. Again, Congress funds the EPA State Revolving Fund. The congressionally directed spending takes money out of that, and then the Clean Water Indian Set-Aside and the Drinking Water Indian Set-Aside is funded. And most of those dollars are going to go through the IHS Sanitation Deficiency System. Okay, and so IHS was given $3.5 billion to put into their sanitation deficiency system over a 5-year period. There was also $20 million that were given towards emerging contaminants, so addressing emerging contaminants through the Clean Water Indian Set-Aside. The Clean Water Indian Set-Aside is administered by EPA in cooperation with the Indian Health Service. Again, it's a 5-year period for these BIL funds, and we're already in 2024, right? So this was a 5-year period from 2022 all the way to 2026. So there is still funding out there through this program, but we've only got a couple of years left. The main thing about the Clean Water Indian Set-Aside and the BIL money is that BIL money is already going to legacy sanitation deficiency system projects. And what that means is basically if whatever was in IHS system as of the end of the year 2021, those projects are going to are the ones that are getting funded through this BIL funding. And thanks, Tucker, for putting in that comment there in the chat. And so that's a pretty good comment. So make sure you're paying attention to the chat there. So new projects that go into the SDS aren't necessarily funded through BIL funding. Okay, that funding, that $3.5 billion has already been allocated. If you want to know more about the Clean Water Indian Set-Aside, again, there's hot links in the PDF the slides that I went ahead and put out. And so you can access all of these websites through that PDF. And I'll go ahead and email those out when I email out the certificates. And so if you aren't aware of who the Indian Health Service is, you probably already know, but they're a division of the U.S. Public Health Service, which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. And they're the group that provides federal health services to American Indians and Alaska Natives. And it's all about, it's all about that federal trust responsibility to provide for the health of our Native communities. And that's what Indian Health Services job is to provide for the health of our Native communities and our people. Their mission is to raise the physical, mental, social, and spiritual health of American Indians and Alaska Natives to the highest level. And their vision is healthy communities and quality healthcare systems through strong partnerships and culturally responsive practices. And so when we talk about healthy communities, this includes water, wastewater, and solid waste infrastructure. IHS has a number of different area offices, and of course they aren't organized like the EPA, regional EPA offices. This is what the map looks like, and so depending on if you're in region 6, 7, or 8, you could be out of IHS Phoenix, the Navajo Nation, Albuquerque, Oklahoma City. Could be out of Nashville if you're in Louisiana or Arkansas, the Great Plains, or the Billings, Montana office. And so you should all be aware of who your Indian Health Service contacts are. All of you tribal nations should have an engineer, a sanitarian assigned to you. If you're not aware of who that is, if you haven't worked with IHS, because there are a few communities, up in Nebraska and Kansas and stuff that don't necessarily have good communication with Indian Health Service. So we can enhance that communication for you if you do need that sort of assistance. The main group at IHS that we're talking about that does the water, the wastewater, and the solid waste is the Division of Sanitation Facilities Construction. They're the ones, they have a technical assistance program to our tribal nations. Their primary responsibility is to identify sanitation deficiencies for water, wastewater, solid waste, and rank them based on the sanitation deficiency system. Okay, so they rank the deficiency, and we'll talk about how they rank them and what that means, because depending on how they're ranked, whether or not they're at a level 5 or a level 1, that really dictates whether or not they're going to get funding. And then they develop and they fund projects, infrastructure projects, to address those identified deficiencies. When we talk about what a sanitation deficiency is, it's basically a need arising from existing water, sewer, or solid waste facilities, or lack of these types of facilities, that creates or may result in exposure to environmental conditions that can negatively impact public health. So really, it has to have some sort of public health impact to be ranked as a sanitation deficiency. And the sanitation deficiency system is that inventory of projects developed to address existing sanitation deficiencies in American Indian and Alaska Native communities. And when we look at the way projects are ranked, the IHS SDS deficiency level, basically the highest deficiency level is a level 5. Basically, it's a community that lacks access to safe water supply or a sewage disposal system. All right, and so those are the ones that IHS is going to direct the most funding to make sure that you have access to clean water and you're able to address wastewater in your communities, okay? When we look at, and so I got this off of IHS and was part of a presentation. When we look at how many projects are being funded by deficiency level. And so over here, these are all in the light or less dark orange. These are the projects that were in the SDS system prior to 2022. So all of those legacy projects up to 2021. Okay, and these are the ones that are going to be funded through the BIL dollars. All right, and so the darker orange here, or the darker brown, these are the SDS projects that were added in 2022. And so these are the ones that will be funded with future Indian set-aside dollars. You can see that basically the point of this diagram, you can see that the majority of the projects before 2022 address proportionally, they're addressing higher deficiency level projects. So they're addressing greater need with greater impact on public health, than the projects added after 2021. So you can see here, a deficiency level 2, this is an Indian tribe or community with a sanitation system. You comply with all the applicable water supply and pollution control laws. And these deficiencies relate to capital improvements that are necessary to improve the facilities so you can meet the needs of such tribe or community for domestic sanitation facilities. So basically you're meeting all the requirements of the federal regulations, but there's still need there. And so, how's IHS going to fund SDS projects after the BIL dollars, are exhausted? Well, they're going to use their regular Indian set aside. Again, they're going to fund the level 5s and 4s primarily, and some of the 3s, but usually deficiency level 1s and 2s aren't necessarily going to be funded. So what's the advantages and disadvantages of the sanitation deficiency system? Well, advantages, it's based on need. The ones with the greatest need are going to be funded. Basically IHS is a one-stop shop. It provides engineering services with direct project implementation. And so they identify the need, they do the engineering work, they identify contractors to implement, the best solution for the situation. They see the project to completion. They hand over the project to the community to operate and maintain. Also, the IHS sanitation deficiency system can be used to purchase equipment that is required to provide for good system operations. Now, disadvantage-wise, it's only for improvements at residential properties and a couple of ceremonial ones. It's not going to fund the tribal administrative offices. It's not going to fund, people in residences that aren't tribal community members or tribal members, and so in that case, they'll fund a proportion of the project. So maybe they say 80% of the project is for, tribal members at their residence, and then 20% isn't. And so in order to get the project built, oftentimes the tribe will have to come up with the other 20%. And sometimes they can, do it in different ways using other grants or, through, by other mechanisms. And so we'll talk about some of those other ways that you can put together a whole project in some of our other webinars that we'll be doing. All right, we already talked about that, only improved for members of tribal nations and Alaska Native villages. And then some projects with IHS SDS aren't eligible. And so, for example, they won't fund the replacement of asbestos cement pipe. For all intents and purposes, asbestos cement pipe, if it isn't disturbed, it lasts a super long time. If the only need shown is that there's AC pipe in the system, and this is for drinking water, or it could be for wastewater AC pipe, if there's no health issue with it, they're not going to fund for AC pipe. And there's a number of other caveats in terms of the types of projects that aren't eligible for this funding. Let's talk about the Clean Water State Revolving Funds real quick. A lot of us don't access that funding, and we'll talk about why. Again, Congress allocates dollars to EPA through the state revolving funds, both the Clean Water and the Drinking Water State Revolving Funds. Again, congressionally directed spending takes away a bunch of that money, and then what's left over goes both to the Indian set-aside, which IHS administers, and then the rest goes to the state revolving funds. The bipartisan infrastructure law, again, injected $11.7 billion for water, wastewater infrastructure and $1 billion for emerging contaminants. And CDS spending took away some of it, and the rest is left over for the Clean Water State Revolving Funds. And so what is it? It's a program, federal-state partnership that provides communities with low-cost financing for a wide range of water quality and infrastructure projects, drinking water and clean water. All right, again, primary purpose is a loan program. Oh, and before we go back, and I think we have time, I wanted to see if I can play this video. Let's see if it pops up. And we'll skip through this. I meant to have this pulled up beforehand, but we're going to see a little ad first. And let me see. And I am probably, all right.
Picking up a glass of water in the sink or washing a load of dishes seem like everyday tasks. But maintaining these water and wastewater services is anything but cheap. These essential services are often provided by small local government entities, and while people pay to use these services through their water bill, the cost of maintaining or improving water and wastewater infrastructure can be higher than what a small community might be able to afford. The infrastructure that makes water and wastewater services possible can cost hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. So where does the funding come from? Oftentimes, the funds for water and wastewater infrastructure are provided through the State Revolving Funds, or SRFs. These programs act like a bank, where states loan money to local governments to complete a variety of water and wastewater infrastructure projects. The loans available have low interest rates, making the SRF an attractive option. Over time, the local government pays back the loan with interest. As loans are repaid, states gain increasingly more money available to loan out, allowing more infrastructure projects to receive funding. The repayment of loans with interest sustains the program and allows the funds to revolve over time. So, if local governments get their funds from the state, where does the state get its funds? Each year, states are allotted a certain amount of SRF federal funding from the Environmental Protection Agency in the form of grants. As long as the states follow specific funding guidelines established by the EPA, each state can decide how to award their loans. States can also choose their own projects to prioritize outside of the federal government's list, using a portion of their grants called set-asides. For example, a state that faces extreme weather may want to use set-asides to fund weather resiliency in water systems. The State Revolving Fund can make beneficial water and wastewater projects attainable for local governments by providing low-interest loans for a variety of projects. These infrastructure projects help provide customers with safe water and wastewater access for years to come. You can learn more about SRFs in your state by visiting your state's Environmental Department website.
Okay, and so that's an explanation how the State Revolving Fund works.
Visiting the SRFs.
It does talk about, state systems, but this funding is also available to tribal communities. And so if you want to learn more about that, you can definitely check out our videos on YouTube there. There's a lot of animations that one of my colleagues does about water and wastewater and how it works. And you can access it through the link that's in the chat there. So that's a short explanation if you didn't know how the state revolving fund works. But basically, it's low interest rate loans from 1% to as low as 0.01%, which is super low interest rate. And so, of course, you have to have the ability to repay it. Usually they're up to 30-year terms, unless your asset life is shorter. And so, like with water meters, that asset life is much shorter than 30 years. And so if you're going to do a meter replacement, if you're doing a drinking water project, then your state revolving loan would be for the period of the asset life. Now, these state revolving funds, you can use them to fund a total project. Maybe the IHS SDS will only fund the 80% of that project. Well, the 20% that is the tribe's responsibility to hook up or do the services to your administration buildings, to the non-tribal members. You can use SRF for those types of projects to fund the whole project. Sometimes you can get principal forgiveness, where actually you take out the loan, and then based on your need, the state may forgive the loan. Now, that's fairly limited. It's case by case. So far, through 2021, this program has provided over $153 billion with, over 44,000 loan agreements, primarily to state systems, but also to tribal communities as well. And these are all the different types of projects that can be funded with that Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Everything from the construction of publicly owned treatment works, to water conservation and efficiency, to water reuse projects. We're seeing kind of this discussion of water reuse more and more in states in the West as drought continues and water resources are pinched. We're starting to see that. And so this Clean Water State Revolving Fund can be used for all sorts of projects associated with wastewater. Advantages to state revolving funds, again, it's available to tribal nations. It's called the State Revolving Fund, but that doesn't mean it's not available to tribal nations. It's pretty easy to get, all right, with a few caveats, and we'll talk about those in the disadvantages. Low interest rate loans. Can you imagine a 0.01% loan? I mean, we're talking a few $1,000s for $1 million loan. And some principal forgiveness that is limited. It's really a quick process from funding application to construction. There aren't a lot of things to get in the way for you to get the funding to go to construction. And there's lots of flexibility offered with this program. And so if you talk to anybody in the state revolving fund process, they're going to talk to you about how flexible their loans can be. Disadvantage, again, it's loan. It has to be repaid unless you get that principal forgiveness. You also have to show a higher historical debt service requirement. So you have to show that you've had, loans before that you've repaid, and you have to provide financial records to show that you have the financial capacity to repay that loan. And so a lot of cases, that's going to be our tribal nations that do bill for services. And we're seeing more and more tribal nations bill for services, but we still have, probably the majority don't. Those services are provided free of charge to their community members. There is limited principal forgiveness. So very limited number of communities do get that principal loan forgiveness, but it is out there. And one of the complications is that every state administers their revolving fund differently. And so that's our job here at the Southwest EFC and also the Wichita State University EFC, is to help you navigate that process if you're interested in accessing these state revolving fund dollars. And so you can go ahead, and that's the link to the different states and their Clean Water State Revolving Fund contacts. And so you can see who is the contact for your state. Let's talk about USDA rural development and the different programs they have for tribal nations for wastewater funding. So Congress, again, allocates dollars to the USDA rural development program, and the bipartisan infrastructure law injected $644.2 million into their program. And so USDA Rural Utilities Service, water and environmental programs help rural communities obtain the TA and financing necessary to develop drinking water and waste disposal systems. Okay, and so TA and financing through the USDA Rural Utilities Service Water and Environmental Program. And there's the link there. Okay, and we're going to talk about two different things that USDA Rural Development does. They have their loan side, which they provide a water and wastewater disposal loan and grant program. They also provide guarantee loans for systems with high capacity. So you have to show that you're financially stable, that you have good management, and that you're technically able to operate infrastructure if you receive one of these loans. And again, they're loans that have to be repaid, but they also do have grants available. Their search program is the Special Evaluation Assistance for Rural Community Households program. We're going to go into details about that one. They also have some pre-development planning grants available through their PPG program, and they also have water and waste facility loans and grants to alleviate health risks on tribal land. So that's very specific to tribal communities. So if we look at their water and wastewater disposal loan and grant program, and there's a link there at the bottom that should be in the slides that are in the chat, it provides funding for clean and reliable drinking water systems, sanitary sewage disposal, sanitary solid waste disposal, and stormwater drainage to households and businesses in eligible rural areas. And so we're talking about not just state systems and communities, but this includes tribes as well. These are long-term, 40-year low interest rate loans. And it can include both a loan and a grant combo. So you can get, some of it can be loan, some of it can be grant, which doesn't have to be repaid. Okay, and so again, long-term, low interest rate loans to help you build that wastewater infrastructure that your community needs. And we've had some of our tribal communities that have accessed this. They needed to have a brand new wastewater treatment plant to stop the sanitary overflows from their lagoons. And so the only option available to them was taking out one of these low interest rate loans. But it worked for them. They implemented rates for services, and now they've been able to repay their loan in a short amount of time based on you know, putting in the pay for services. The search loans helps very small, yet to be financially distressed rural communities, including tribal communities, with pre-development feasibility studies, design and TA on proposed water and waste disposal projects. And so this is stuff to help you do some of that pre-engineering assessments to help you determine a best solution for your community. And really, it's not much money out there. It's a $30,000 max amount. It used to be enough to do preliminary engineering work. Now it's probably not. For sure, it's definitely not with rising costs, but it's a start. And you can couple this with other pre-planning grants out there that are available through the state or through other federal programs. Your rural area has to have a population of less than 2,500 people. So really, it's for tribal communities that serve an area of less than 2,500 people. So our very small tribal communities. And to access this, you have to have a demonstrated need. Again, this is a planning grant. You don't have to repay it. They also have a different planning grant out there, the pre-development planning grant, the PPG. Helps eligible low-income communities, including tribes, plan and develop applications for proposed USDA rural development water or waste disposal projects. So this is money you can use to plan a project that maybe you'll get a loan through USDA rural development for. 60,000 max, so it's twice. One of the bad things about this is that it requires a $20,000 max. So if you have a project you're pre-planning for it, it's going to cost 80 grand to do pre-planning. This PPG will take care of 60 grand of that, but again, the tribe has to come up with the other 20 grand. You do again have to have a demonstrated need to access these dollars. The water and waste facility loans and grants to alleviate health risks on tribal lands. It helps get safe, reliable drinking water and waste disposal services to low-income communities that face significant health risks. And so you have to have significant health risks to access these dollars. It's really for our small to medium-sized systems or communities, less than 10,000 people. And you have to have a greater than 50% Native American population. And so your community has to have more than 50% Native Americans in order to access these funds. And again, you have to meet per capita income and unemployment requirements, which most of our tribal communities do meet those requirements. And in this case, it can be a 100% grant to get this funding. It's a first come, first served type of program. As you can see, again, there's a lot of different programs with USDA rural development and helping you find which one works for your project, be it a loan or a grant program or a pre-development grant. That's up to us to help you identify and help you access these dollars. So if you're interested and you have a project out there that you need help with, please contact us either through our website or you'll get my contact information at the end of this webinar. The advantages of USDA rural development, lots of different opportunities for funding. And there's a common application through their RD Apply portal, okay? And we can help you figure out how to apply for them. Disadvantage, from funding to award can be a pretty slow process, so it takes time. It doesn't happen quickly. Bureau of Reclamation, again, Congress gives the BOR funding. The bipartisan infrastructure law injected $320 million into this program. Now, there's a number of BOR programs out there. Most of them are going to be for drinking water, but there is one that's wastewater specific, the Native American Affairs Program. They're committed to increasing opportunities for tribal nations to develop, manage, and protect their water and related sources. And so it's all about tribal communities and helping them make sure that they're meeting and protecting and making sure that clean water and wastewater are protected in their communities. And I know we're almost out of time, but we'll wrap up pretty quickly here. BOR also has the Title 16 Water Reclamation and Reuse Program. It identifies and investigates different opportunities to help reclaim and reuse wastewaters and impaired ground and surface water in the 17 Western states and Hawaii. And again, this is limited to the 17 Western states. And so if you're somewhere in the Midwest or the upper Midwest, you may not be able to access this funding through this program. But if you're in one of those Western states or Hawaii, this program could be for you if you're interested in reusing water for irrigation or for some other type of purposes that reclaim wastewater. And you can use this funding for both planning, design, and you can use it for construction of these types of projects. The last programs I wanted to talk about today are the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Again, Congress gives HUD funding every year to do these programs. The BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, injected $1.1 billion into this program. There's 3 different programs that are very specific to tribes: the Indian Community Development Block Grant, the Indian Housing Block Grant, and the Tribal Housing Activities Loan Guarantee Program, otherwise known as Title VI. The Indian Community Development Block Grant Program, it provides communities with direct grants to develop our Native Indian and Alaska Native communities, to make sure they have decent housing, a suitable living environment, economic opportunities, and it's primarily for low and moderate income programs. And this program includes infrastructure construction. It's not just about housing, but it's making sure that those houses have roads to them, that they have water and sewer facilities access, and making sure that they have that. The Indian Housing Block Grant is basically the primary means by which the federal government fulfills that trust responsibility to our Native communities to provide adequate housing to both Native Americans and Alaska Native villages. And it's the single largest source of Indian housing assistance out there. Okay, and it's not just, again, about providing houses for the people in our Native communities, but it also includes providing water and wastewater services to those houses. So it's connecting them to the sanitary sewer, it's connecting them to the drinking water system, making sure that if they're out a little bit, that the lines are run to them and that they have suitable sanitary services offered to their house. The last HUD program I'm going to talk about is the Tribal Housing Activities Loan Guarantee Program, Title VI. Allows, again, recipients of that Indian Housing Block Grant Fund to use current and future fund allocations as a means to leverage to obtain, guaranteed financing for those programs. All the proceeds from this Title VI Guaranteed Loan Program can be used to both create new housing, rehab housing, acquire land for housing, but also do the architectural and engineering plans for water and wastewater systems, and to help build that required infrastructure for that housing, okay? And so this is a guaranteed loan program through the Housing and Urban Development. The advantages of all the HUD programs is both the ICDBG and the IHBG are grant funds. And the HUD includes a grant administrator. It helps you with the application process and helps you keep track of the funding so that you meet the requirements of those grants. Now, the disadvantages is that a lot of the times with the HUD funding is you have to have all the other funding in place at the time that you put in applications and for the ICDBG and the IHG programs, okay? So there's timing issues. You might have to make sure that if you're going to use state revolving funds, that program's in place, or if you're going to couple it with an IHS sanitation deficiency project, you have to make sure that's in place before you apply for these types of grant programs. All right, so the non-federal funding opportunities we're not going to learn about today, but there's a number of them through the state, either through capital outlay or other programs, or self-funded options that we'll learn about in future webinars. We're not going to talk about them today. And I sure do appreciate you sticking on with me for the extra few minutes today. Again, my name is Matt Ziegler. I'm the Tribal Water Utility Program Director here at the Southwest Environmental Finance Center. We've worked for a long, long time with our tribal nations in EPA Region 6, and now we've expanded our program through an EPA agreement to tribal nations in EPA Region 7 and 8. And so hopefully you'll see a lot more from us. You will, in terms of training and assistance. And if you need any assistance, you can email me directly, or you can go ahead and access the assistance and put in a request through the website. And with that, that ends our session for today.